You decide that this time it will be different. You start running, or studying every evening, or waking up at 6. The first week feels structured and almost clean. You track your progress. You feel slightly proud. Around day 10 or 14, something shifts. You wake up and it feels heavier. One skipped day becomes 2. Within a week, the plan is gone. Most people explain this in one sentence: I just don't have discipline. But if the same pattern repeats across different goals, the explanation is probably incomplete. What collapses in week 2 is usually not motivation itself. It is the model of change you are using. Welcome to Mini Mind Hack. Today, we will look at why motivation often fades after about 2 weeks. What is actually happening during that period? How your sense of identity gets overloaded, and why modern life makes this cycle more likely than ever. By the end, you should understand why the drop feels personal, even when it is structural. In the first days of a new habit, several things work in your favor. There is novelty. Your brain pays attention to what is new. It releases dopamine not only when you succeed, but when you anticipate progress. You also have a clear narrative. I am becoming someone better. That narrative simplifies decisions. It reduces internal debate. During this phase, effort feels meaningful. You do not yet feel the long-term cost. You are running on anticipation and a clean self-story. Psychologist E. Torrey Higgins, working in the 1980s and 1990s in the United States, developed what he called self-discrepancy theory. His central idea was simple. We carry different versions of ourselves in our mind. The actual self, who we think we are right now. The ideal self, who we wish to become. And the ought self, who we think we should be. At the beginning of a new habit, the gap between actual and ideal self becomes energizing. You feel the tension, but it is hopeful tension. Each workout or study session feels like a step across that gap. But here is what often happens around week 2. The novelty decreases. The behavior becomes repetitive. At the same time, your daily life has not disappeared. Work is still demanding. Messages still arrive. You are still tired in the evening. The new habit is no longer a symbolic act. It becomes an added demand on a stable identity. Now the gap between actual and ideal self can change its emotional tone. Instead of hope, you start to feel pressure. Instead of progress, you feel how far you still are from the ideal. The same discrepancy that energized you now creates strain. This is where people interpret the feeling as a lack of character. But another mechanism is involved. Roy Baumeister, an American psychologist known for his work on self-control, argued that self-regulation draws on limited mental resources. The exact model of ego depletion has been debated and refined, but the broader point remains relevant. Sustained self-control is effortful, especially when layered on top of stress. If you attempt to change not one small behavior, but your entire identity at once, you multiply that effort. You are not just running 3 times a week. You are trying to become a disciplined person. You are not just studying. You are trying to become intellectually serious. Each action carries symbolic weight. Over time, this creates identity overload. Your mind has to monitor, evaluate, and compare constantly. Did I act like the new me today? Am I still behind? This background evaluation consumes attention. It turns a simple behavior into a referendum on who you are. Modern life amplifies this dramatically. You are exposed to curated images of people who appear consistent, productive, optimized. Social media compresses years of development into a single scroll. The standard becomes extreme. The comparison becomes constant. So when you start a new habit, you often try to close a very large identity gap very quickly. Instead of adjusting one variable, you attempt a personal transformation. Earlier generations also changed habits, but they were not comparing themselves daily to thousands of high-performing strangers. Author James Clear, writing in the 2010s about habit formation, popularized the idea of identity-based habits. His useful insight is that small, repeated behaviors can slowly shape how you see yourself. The direction is important. Behavior first, identity later. When people reverse it and try to install a new identity immediately, they overload the system. In real life, this looks like this. You start running and tell yourself, I am an athlete now. You miss 2 sessions and the identity feels false. So you quit. If instead you frame it as, I am someone who runs once this week, the identity shift is smaller. It creates less internal tension. It is easier to stabilize. Notice what changes over time. In week 1, you feel excited. In week 2, you feel evaluated. If you pay attention, you can often detect the moment when the habit stops being concrete and starts being symbolic. That shift is the warning sign. The problem is not that motivation naturally dies after 14 days. The problem is that your model expects constant emotional intensity and rapid identity change. When reality becomes slower and less dramatic, you interpret it as failure. A more realistic model of change is narrower and less heroic. It reduces the identity load. It treats habits as experiments rather than declarations. It allows the ideal self to move closer slowly without daily judgment. This does not feel inspiring. It feels almost modest. But modest systems survive longer than dramatic reinventions. If you return to that moment in week 2, when you wake up and everything feels heavier, you can reinterpret it. The heaviness does not prove you are incapable. It signals that novelty has faded and the behavior is entering the ordinary phase. This is where identity change actually begins, if it begins at all. Most people quit at that point not because they lack motivation, but because they expected motivation to feel the same as it did on day 1. Understanding that difference does not remove effort. It removes unnecessary self-blame. Thank you for watching. If this pattern feels familiar, please share your experience in the comments. And if you want more explorations of how identity and modern life interact, consider subscribing. I will see you in the next video.